everything you've thought about how the world works, one night you find out you're completely wrong. Don't you hate it when this happens? I lost my body on the way. You don't need fear when you're not in your body. So it doesn't exist. It was just I had this big sense of can do, none of the hesitation that I had in real life. I was just like, you know what, I'm going for it. And said more real than anything back there. This business of trying to live my life as Louisa, and I just felt like, just can't. And so I was like, I'm out of there. That's awesome. And I had this sense of freedom.
Welcome everyone to Our Sliver of Time. Today we have a very special guest, Louisa Peck, who is going to share her near-death experience and the profound after effects, including playing a huge role in your sobriety, to my understanding. Louisa, thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure.
Well, Dave, thanks for having me. So should I just dive right into the NDE?
That would be absolutely fine. And then I think we could hit some questions after. So by all means, if you'd like to tell your story.
Let's go. Well, it tells itself. So this is Manhattan, Greenwich Village, 1982. I was 22 years old and I was living in New York because I was chasing coolness. Coolness was my God. It was my deity. And I had a lot of insecurities, and I just kind of felt like if I could just feel cool enough, if I could get that, like I got that Teflon going on, I look good thing, I would feel okay, sort of from the outside in instead of from the inside out. So I moved to New York and had gone to a few nightclubs, and this was the one I liked best, Peppermint Lounge. It had some repute, though it's gone. And so they had 3 floors of music, and the bottom floor was new wave. And I went there with my date. My date was my secret boyfriend who I'd recently broken up with, yet to get back together with his best friend. But I'd just broken up with the real boyfriend. So basically, I was a total geek in high school. I was total, like, I just studied and I never had a social life. So very intentionally, when I went to college and after college, I mimicked people that seemed cool and had a social life going on. And most people fell for it. So it worked, Anyway, these guys fell for it. So inside I was just a hollow, empty, like, am I doing it right? That's all I was thinking. So I felt like at the Peppermint Lounge, I was doing it right and I was going to be cool. And I had asked this guy to come because he was a coke dealer and I was an alcoholic from a family of alcoholics. And I had discovered that cocaine was even better. It just took away all my self-loathing. It made everything interesting, what it does. Anyway, we snorted all the cocaine he brought. And then we were in the nightclub and we started coming down. And so we asked around, is anybody selling coke? And somebody pointed us to this kind of shady looking guy. He reminded me, if you've ever seen Saturday Night Fever, of the suicidal character in Saturday Night Fever. That's what his vibe was like. He had on a kind of leisure suit and he had these baggies and he's like, it's good stuff, good stuff. And we put it on our gums, it numbed our gums, and he took our money and he left. And so I now know it wasn't cocaine. Cocaine is not the only thing that's going to numb your gums. It was actually lidocaine. But I was all excited and we started snorting it. And my date said, this stuff is worthless. It's not doing anything. And he threw down his bill like he wasn't going to do anymore. And I just thought, well, it did numb our gums, so it must be cocaine. And so it's just crappy cocaine. So if I do this whole pile at once, I will probably get a little bit high. And I just did it. And I remember heading for the bathroom was when I first started to notice effects. So I know it was lidocaine now because I've been sober 29 years. And a lot of my friends in AA used to be drug dealers, and they have told me when they heard this story that probably wasn't at all cocaine. We used to cut cocaine with lidocaine because it's cheaper, and it sounds like somebody sold you pure lidocaine, which is poison. And I don't know if the guy knew what he was doing or not, but anyway, it shuts down your autonomic nervous system. So all the things that take care of themselves in your body, your heartbeat, your breathing, your blood pressure, all of these things start to shut down. And so the first effect was tunnel vision started developing. I couldn't see very well. I waited in line for the bathroom, and by the time I got to the stall, it seemed like the lights were going out. Like it was just like somebody had a dimmer and it was getting darker and darker. And I couldn't read any of the graffiti in the stall. And usually like some of it's that weird stuff that you can't read, but some of it's in regular English. And I couldn't read any of it. And I said, something is wrong here. And I wasn't afraid, and I didn't occur to me that I was dying, but I did feel that there was something wrong, that there wasn't enough air in the basement. So I came out, I found my date, and I said, there's no air down here, there's no air. And I was kind of freaking out because if you have oxygen starvation, you tend to freak out. It's just what happens. So my heart was probably only going, like 20 beats a minute by then, and my brain was just not getting enough. So that's why I was breathing as hard as I could, but with no pulse, your brain's not going to get any oxygen. So he took me to the bar. The bartender just thought I was freaking out and said, here, have a glass of water. I took the water. I did not want it, but I was kind of a people pleaser, or I just, to be nice, whatever, I took a sip. And it seemed to me that I had collapsed or something, because I felt something strike me under my chin really hard. And what happened for them in the nightclub was that I had a grand mal seizure all over the floor, and then had a cardiac arrest, and then didn't respond to CPR. So on my side though, it was like a Popeye punch had hit me under the chin, and I went shooting out of the nightclub up through, and I had a sense of Manhattan kind of disappearing below me and me just sailing up into the sky. It was actually night, but in my experience, it was a brilliant blue sky. And I had this feeling of, oh, thank God. Like I didn't feel anything about dying. What I felt was, I am so glad to be free of that tangle down there. It felt like a bunch of knitting that the cat like scrambled up or something. This business of trying to live my life as Louisa, and I just felt like, just can't. And so I was like, I'm out of there. That's awesome. And I had this sense of freedom, and I was slowing in my trajectory, and I realized that the ocean was all around me, like 360 blue ocean. And I knew somehow, I don't know how I knew this, that it was completely unpolluted. It was not like you're going to find a bunch of plastic and, fishing nets in this. It was pure blue, and the sky was pure blue. And I decided to do this back bend and do a swan dive, which I had a sense would be fun. And I pulled it off. I was so stoked. And then I saw that the water was way far below me. And I thought, isn't it like concrete? If you jump off the Golden Gate Bridge and it's like concrete. And I wasn't scared. I just thought, we'll find out. Because you don't need fear when you're not in your body. So it doesn't exist. It was just a So when I did hit the water, I dove down perfectly, which would certainly not happen in real life. And I went way down. I could see the bubbles around me. It was really beautiful. I could see the light above me. But again, I thought that's a long way up. I don't know how I'm going to swim up there. And the next thing I knew, I broke the surface. And all I would think when these things would happen was, cool. Like I didn't really question how did that happen, because nothing is physical on the other side. It's all representing stuff. So I saw a shore, and I wanted to be there. I remember that I started to swim. I'm not the greatest swimmer, and the next thing I knew, I was wading, like just, up to my calves in the water, wading through the waves onto the beach. And again, I just thought, awesome. And then I saw to my left a house that was up on a mesa, and it was a really old, weather-beaten house. But a mesa, I mean like a sea stack. I don't know if you guys have sea stacks, but out here on the West Coast, it's like the ocean eats away everything except for like a column of land, a big column of land. And on the top of that column was this house. So I wasn't sure how to get up there, but next thing I knew, I was at the base, not at the house. It turned out not to be a mesa of earth, but of rock. And it was covered with this disgusting green slime. I don't remember smelling. I don't remember what it smelled like, but I remember being repulsed by a smell and just seeing that it was so putrid and slimy and gross. But I just thought, it's not stopping me. I'm strong, I'm capable. I had this big sense of can do, none of the hesitation that I had in real life. I was just like, you know what, I'm going for it. And so I just started climbing. And again, with the rock climbing, there I was, I made it to the top. But don't you hate it when this happens? I lost my body on the way. So when I got to the house, I was like this far from the door sill, and all I was like a tiny subjective camera moving through space. I don't like to do this too much, but I'm going to do it just a little bit. If you notice, I went through all these different elements, first air, then water, and then land/organic, and now came another one, which was wood. And that's kind of the fusing of life. I don't know, that's how I think of it. Plus it's an element in the Chinese system. I was so close to the ground that I could see the wood, and I could see it was super worn from all my ancestors. I understood somehow intuitively crossing the same threshold. And how I knew that, I don't know, but I knew. And that realization had nothing to do with the 22-year-old punk who was back at Manhattan, because I just didn't give a rat's ass about my ancestors. My both parents had kind of moved to the West Coast to get away from their families, so we didn't really see family much, and all I knew was some pictures, and I just didn't care. But on that side, I was so deeply moved, like this is where we go, and now it's my turn. And I could feel them all witnessing. I couldn't see them. I only saw the house, I only saw the wood, but I could feel them witnessing me, and I could feel how overjoyed they were that my turn had come and I was gonna get to be with all of them. And I felt overjoyed about that. And I remember in particular feeling my dad's dad, who I never saw. He died before I was born, and my mom kind of didn't like him, so she'd always just kind of like that about him. He was just a picture in my dad's black and white picture in my dad's closet. But I knew he was like one of the most excited. He was like, you're my granddaughter, and I'm gonna get to meet you. I was super excited. But there was supposed to be, I knew, an armchair in that room facing this big picture window that looked out at the ocean. And that's where all my ancestors sat to enjoy the view. And I was only this high, and there was no chair, so I felt gypped. I felt like, what's the deal? Where's the chair? And which is weird. But anyway, I just had the thought, like, I want to see the beauty. I want to see the ocean. As soon as I thought that, something grabbed me by my non-existent sternum, like, right now you have a sense of where your heart is. Even though I didn't have a body, I had a sense of where my heart would be, and that's what it pulled. And it pulled me, so I scooted over the surface of the floor, and I was kind of like giddy with it. I was like, whoa, what's happening? And then I went up, and I was more like, what? And then over the windowsill and out, and I was flying forward. And I was just like ecstatic. There's this sensation of zooming ahead that is pretty common to NDEs. I think it has to do with when you're kind of ascending to a higher vibration. I don't know exactly what that means, but it kind of makes sense to me. But in any case, all I can tell you is even though I didn't have a body, I had a big sense of like whoosh, whoosh. And I have had that same sense on 2 other occasions when I almost died. So it's got something to do with that. But anyway, as I was zooming over the ocean, I had a kind of cynical, skeptical thought. And it's funny because I heard another one of your interviewees voice this too. I just thought, isn't this just a little too perfect? Like beautiful sunset colors, sun in front of me, like making this dazzling golden path, and I'm zooming over that, over the ocean, and wait a minute, people can't fly, I might be dreaming. And then I thought, this is real? And as soon as I asked, is this real? This voice kind of answered, it's like in your bones, it's like in you, and it said, more real than anything back there. And I knew this voice was somebody, and I knew that it was right. I knew that this was a level of realness beyond the little pictogram that we have going in this soggy bunch of noodles we call a brain. So it felt like I was really there instead of I was cognizing being there, I guess you'd say. Anyway, the sun's getting bigger and bigger. And again, without fear, I had this thought, am I going to vaporize? And I began to see the corona and thought, I'm probably going to vaporize. But instead, I just went through this filament, and then I was inside the sun. And inside the sun was light, and nothing but light. It was such light that I couldn't see anything else, but as people often say, it doesn't hurt your eyes. It's just delicious light, and it's all through your being. It's like if light could reach your consciousness, if light could be, and it is there all the time anyway. It's in your cells, it's animating you, it's what's making you, it's your aliveness, but there is so much of it there, and it's love. It's love. Our aliveness is love. And so I felt absolutely subsumed, infused, surrounded, absorbed by love. And I remember, like, it's so funny because when I really go there, I can think of kind of passing through little stages of like, wow, this is awesome. Whoa, this is really awesome. Oh my God, this is so everything I've ever wanted. Because I had that insecurity, that thing that drove me to chase the coolness was this feeling of not being enough. And I totally felt I was enough. I lacked for nothing. And then I became aware of a being that was holding me like a baby and just pouring in love. You're so loved. You're so loved. And I need to say, it was not like they say, yeah, we do this for everyone. It was me. And they knew everything about me and adored me, thought I was absolutely adorable. And I kind of loved the parent back. And eventually it just became this state of love and no more situation, no more anything. But then the parent said, again, in that same voice, you can't stay, you're not done yet. And both these concepts were totally foreign to me in the instant that it said them, because I had forgotten all about that there was anywhere else to be. Stay versus what, go back. I had forgotten about back. And then also, you're not done with what? I had no idea what it was talking about, but it went black. Like from full light to complete darkness. And I stepped through a hissy fit. First of all, I was like, no. And I remember just screaming no with everything in me, and just also feeling like this can't happen. I can't let this happen. And I'm going to show that parent that I'm someone to contend with. And it was the feeling you would have if you were a toddler and you were kicking at the shins of some 7-foot person, but that's what I was going to kick at the shins. I was going to show them that they couldn't send me back. And all I got in response was a very loving, case closed, sweetheart, it's done deal. And I felt myself drop. And that was the only time during my whole near-death experience when I felt fear. And it was just an instant of terror. I would say it was an instant of hell, because I was dropping from that state of bliss toward my body. Didn't know that at the time. I just remember I didn't really think about hell, but I thought, this is not good. And then I kind of stabilized, and in the blackness I began to see these little chalk white stick figures, and I noticed that they were, just like you would draw on a blackboard. They had these little play structures. They were going on swing sets, they were going on teeter totters, and they were laughing in these little high voices, and they were saying little rhymes to each other, like, how many hippos make a flim flam, and just little weird sort of hopscotch weirdness that kids yell out, that doesn't really mean anything. And I thought, man, this is nowhere near as good as the light, but I'm going to hang out just like I was watching Saturday morning cartoons. I actually had the little thought of Saturday morning cartoons, and I'm just going to watch this until I can go back to the light. I had a sense that it was like a toy that the parent had given me to kind of help me pass the time until it was time to go back, which is sort of a metaphor for life a little bit, but we're not supposed to just pass the time. We're supposed to do stuff. But anyway, one of the stick figures got closer, and as he got closer, his circle filled in solid like a dinner plate. And all of a sudden, I couldn't see around him to watch the others. And I began to realize that he was talking to me. This was not a good thing. I remembered in this kind of horrible, this can't be sense of catastrophe, that I was back in the meat puppet, is how I thought of it. I was trapped, locked into the meat puppet. No way to get out. It's a terrible feeling. And he thought that he was a he and I was a me, as opposed to I had understood there in the light for just that time that I was there that you just think what you want to someone. And he thought, no, it's supposed to make your air come out and shape it and make this code, and the other person does it back again. And it just seemed so dumb. And I didn't want to do it. I was still, for a few seconds, I was like, no, I'm not, I can't. And I've often compared it to like if somebody said, Dave, you're going back to kindergarten, sorry. And you're going to spend the rest of your life there. You can play with blocks. You can do Lego. You'll be great. And you just feel like that's not, I know cooler stuff, and I don't want to do that for forever. But nope, stuck in the meat puppet, stuck in the kindergarten. So I finally answered him, Louisa. He was saying, how many fingers? What is your name? And so I was like 2, and then Louisa. And the aftermath, there's a lot that goes on. I realized it was in a puddle of what I thought was water was actually sweat. There is no reason for me to have come back. People kill themselves by squirting a thing of lidocaine from a tube into their mouth. It's 5% lidocaine. I think mine was pure, and it was the powder. It stopped my heart. Why should it start again? But I was fine. I had been without pulse or breathing for 3 minutes or more, and the bartender had been doing CPR that whole time. So they made me stand up. In my mind, I was kind of like I was 5 years old. That was the kind of attitude I had toward everything, because I thought something super, super fun had just happened. Like the coolest, most fun thing ever had just happened. Yet everybody was all grave and like, something terrible happened. And I was like, man, they don't know. And I was kind of like trying to hide this wonderful sense. Anyway, we all went upstairs. I didn't know why we were all going upstairs. I didn't know why there were so many people, because they were all gawkers. The music had stopped everything. I had stopped everything. And we all went upstairs, and people were still gawking. I guess if you seem somebody to be dead for a long time, it's kind of interesting. I don't know, because they were all standing around, and the bartender came over and talked to my date, and I didn't know who he was, but I gradually gathered I had been dead. And I was 22 and just such a little moron that I was like, oh my God, that's so embarrassing. Oh my God, that's a big deal. That's so much drama. We didn't say drama back then, but we would just say that's such a big deal. And then he came and talked to me, which I was kind of dreading. And I felt like, oh my God, he had his mouth on my mouth for like more than 3 minutes. That's so embarrassing. It's like kissing. And like, he was bald. And I just thought that was like, he was so old that it was just like really just twisted. And so I was just kind of like, he was like, you were gone for a long time. And I was like, yeah, and smoking, yep. And he said, we thought you weren't coming back. And I was like, yeah. It's ridiculous. If I hadn't cried so much in the years since at the missed opportunity to thank this man for giving me my life, giving me my son, giving me my everything that I have in terms of a joyous, wonderful life now, it would be hilarious, but it's actually tragic. I didn't have what it takes to acknowledge what he'd done. So I didn't want to go to the hospital. Once I figured out we were waiting for an ambulance, once I figured out that the ambulance was for me, I just told my date, don't make me go, don't make me go, because I didn't want my parents to find out. I didn't want to be at a hospital. So he just, there were a bunch of cabs in front of the nightclub, as there used to be in those days. And so he just grabbed my hand and pulled me, and we got in a cab, and all the people came and banged on the trunk. And I didn't know. I just thought, is that a game? Bang on the trunk? Like, I had some brain damage. I did. But they were saying, like, what are you doing? You got to go to the hospital. So that's a break. Do you have any questions about that part?
That is an incredible story. One of my first questions actually is that when you were floating above this ocean and you asked yourself, is this real? And you got a response. How did you kind of take that? Was it like a shock to you, or was it very
Yes.
matter of fact?
No, it was quite a shock. It's just as if you said, well, I wonder what time it is, and something went 3 o'clock. Like, it was just like, what's happening? I didn't know anyone was with me, and yet, I've heard some people describe it really well. It's in kind of the space around you, but also kind of in you, because you're not occupying real 3D space. So, uh, I just had a sense of, this is someone important. Um, but I was very surprised.
Yeah, that would shock the hell out of me, to be honest. I think I wouldn't sleep for weeks, I feel like, if that happened. Um, so after this experience, like you said, you didn't feel the need to go to the hospital, and you were kind of trying to move past it, it seemed. How did you acknowledge this experience? Did you take it literally at first, or did you kind of think maybe you were hallucinating or something like this?
Yeah. So when we got back to the apartment, we had an apartment on West 85th Street in Riverside, and I told my roommate the story in the morning, which I remembered with perfect clarity. And when I got to the part about the parent, she asked me, was that God? And I was an atheist, and she was an atheist. We were both atheists. So it was just kind of a weird question to ask. And I felt really uncomfortable, because part of me knew it had been Goddish. That's all I could say. But I just laughed and said, yeah, it was God. And just kind of evaded the question like that. But at a certain point, I went into the little bedroom of the apartment, and my plan was to write down this amazing hallucination in my journal. But as soon as I started to kind of think about it, I'm like, how is this a hallucination? Like, I could remember when he answered me and said, more real than anything back there. And that, like, how I can remember that feeling of more real than here, and that he had been right. And I could also remember the moment when he said, I just called it the parent then, when it said, you can't stay, you're not done. How that had felt. I mean, I just remembered things, and I was like, how can this was not a hallucination. This was way bigger. But this was 1982. So you can't just go Google near-death experience. Number one, because there's no internet. And number two, because there's no term near-death experience. So like Raymond Moody had written Life After Life, I guess he published in 1975. This is 7 years later, and about 3 people had read it. Like, seriously, nobody talked about near-death experiences. At least not till 1990, when the movie Ghost came out. But so I had in my mind 2 alternatives. Either it was a hallucination, or religion was right. And that was a horrifying idea to me, because I still to this day want nothing to do with an anthropomorphized God. I want nothing to do with the whole shaming nature of religion. I want nothing to do with religion. So to me, then, there was no alternative in the middle. There was no, yes, it was real, but it was not religion. It was not in your brain, but it was not religion. There is a spiritual realm. I didn't have that option. So forced to choose between the two, I chose hallucination. And I made up this thing that was kind of like my brain was shutting down, and the last little spark of thought at the core of my brain was love, because that was the first thing I felt as an infant, I thought. I told myself. And so I decided, must be that as your brain shuts down, there's only this one thought left, so it seems really powerful. And I was like, yeah, that's it, yeah. And I knew I was bullshitting myself, but the idea of going to church or somehow changing myself because of this experience. Yeah, imagine if everything you've thought about how the world works, one night you find out you're completely wrong. We can't change our minds that fast, right? So it seemed to me my only choice was to just label it hallucination. And I was like, okay, that was cool. When I would tell people about it, I would tell it as a hallucination. I would say, we didn't think cocaine was a hallucinogenic, but who knew? I guess it is. Totally different class of drugs. And it wasn't, I didn't know, I didn't find out it was lidocaine for many years later. So yeah, I just rejected it. And my plan was to go on drinking, to go on chasing coolness, to just keep trying to grab that cookie of good enough that I could never quite reach.
You almost took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to ask if, was that the last night that you kind of drank and used substances, or, was there a delay? But
So no. I nearly killed myself drinking several times after that. No, what happened was, I had a drinking addiction, I had substance addiction, and I had relationship addiction. And so I ended up getting with that secret boyfriend and moving with him to Boston. But I began to get more and more depressed. And I also was getting more and more panic attacks. And I was just filled with falsehood and shoving down this memory, and it wasn't working for me. So 5 years later, I saw a ghost, and I tell about all of these experiences in my book, which is called, as you can see, what is it called? From NDE denier to full-on woo-woo against my will. So this is all against my will. The first thing that happened was seeing the ghost, and I tell the whole story in the book, but basically we were on a beach in a terrible storm, and he looked like the fish sticks guy. And I watched him for a long time, planning to compliment him on his vintage rain gear. But when we passed, he didn't respond to me. So I whirled around to say, what an asshole. And he was not there. And after exploring a lot of other options of where he could have gone, I went back and there were only my tracks. So this made me angry. It made me angry. I like to say, like if I took this cup and let go of it and it just stayed there in the air. And what would you do, right? I saw this guy and then he wasn't there, and I was angry. Then I knew in advance that my nephew was going to die, and it was a terrible feeling to know it in advance. I knew he was going to die during childbirth. And then when it happened, there's so much guilt because you knew, but you weren't able to stop it, because what were you going to say? Hey, I think your baby's going to die. You can't just say that. And also, when everyone else is purely absorbed in mourning, you're absorbed in mourning, but in your back of your mind is like, how did that happen? How did I know? And I write about that in the book too. But everything got worse. So that was 1982 that I had the near-death experience. Let's go 12 years later. I'm still drinking. I'm still chasing the coolness. I'm still thinking I'm going to get with the cool people and then everything's going to be good. And I'm absolutely miserable, and I'm sick of myself. And I have betrayed that boyfriend. I have betrayed my next girlfriend. I have chased after people and just made myself pathetic in doing so. And I'd gotten into reading Bukowski. I don't know if you've ever read any Bukowski, but he's just all like, fuck death, blood, shit. He's just like, and I was like, yeah, there's no meaning to life except to be a rebel. That's all there is. And, I was, my gone through my dyke phase of shaving my head and wearing the leather, and I was kind of, then I went into this nature dyke phase, and then nothing, didn't matter how I rewrote myself, how I redefined myself, there was still me, and I hated that person. So in 1994, I went to this kegger and I got super shit faced, and I just kept falling down, and I didn't care. I thought this cool boy was going to show up at some point, so I was just sticking around. And eventually, two of my friends, I worked at an espresso place, and two of my friends took me to a house, and they said, sleep in this person's bed and don't drive, because you can't walk, you can't talk, sleep it off. And they left my keys on the table, and I just thought, ha. And I got up and I took the keys, and this is nothing to be proud of. It's madness. But I took the keys and I found my car, and I couldn't find the ignition for, I can't describe how long. Let's think about, like, what is it like to actually look for the ignition for 5 minutes? Like, that's how shit-faced I was. And I finally found it, by feeling and stuff like that, because I couldn't see anything. And then I lived out in the woods, and so I drove on these windy, dark roads at 80 miles an hour, blasting tunes, thinking I was a badass. Got to this railroad crossing where the road got skinny. I knew it got skinny because I'd been there a million times. There's hardly room for 2 cars to pass, and in this case, all the reflector signs, those striped signs, they were blurred all the way across it, because I was seeing double, triple, quadruple. I don't know how that works, but you can see more than double. And I just thought, I don't care. I just don't care if I die. I don't care if I hit one. And I just kind of aimed generally for the middle, got through, and thought, phew, that was good. And I got to my house. I got out of the car. I was too drunk to stand, so I was holding onto the car door. And it was a starry, beautiful night. Crisp. It was November. And the air, I felt the air. I saw the stars. And I thought, I drive like such a badass when I'm wasted. And then that's when this guy, Ignacio, my angel, the guy who said more real than anything back there, he yelled at me, and it felt like something shooting through me from the stars into the ground. It felt like lightning, but it was a thought. And he said 2 things. This is the last time I can help you, and you do know right from wrong. And I knew he was referencing the journal. I knew he was talking, like, I knew he knew everything, right? And I also knew that he had helped me. It was he, not I, who had crossed that bridge. In the morning, I had spilled the oatmeal, I had left the milk out, and there was this, and I remembered none of that. I remembered total blackout, nothing. But the crossing the bridge was perfectly clear, and the moment when he yelled at me was perfectly clear. Because same way that my NDE is so clear, when things are happening in a spiritual level, it's bigger than your brain. It's not a brain recording, it's a spiritual recording, and that's a different thing. So I can still remember those crystal clear. I knew that was something. What it made me do was go see someone who was in AA, that I knew was in AA, and I wouldn't tell her that I thought I had a drinking problem. I just kind of hung around, yeah, and I kept wanting to say it, but I couldn't say it. Finally, when I was going out the door, I said, well, I guess I should get home. I'm kind of a little bit hungover. And all of a sudden she went, oh my God. She like understood that what I had not been saying. So she just grabbed a piece of paper and wrote down the number for Alcoholics Anonymous. And it wasn't until January 29th, 1995, that I kind of decided, okay, I can either commit suicide by drinking a gallon of vodka, or I can call this number. And then I thought, well, I can't like drink the vodka, then call the number. So I'll call the number. And if I don't like that, then I'll drink the vodka. And this sweet grandmother answered the phone, and she was so sweet. She told me how to get to a meeting. And so I went to that first meeting on January 29th, 1995, and I haven't had a drink since. So here's the thing though, once I started to pray, because in AA, they were like prayer and meditation, it's the 11th step. Once I tried praying, or even, 3rd step, once I started just acknowledging God, I made that kind of shield that I had around me, blocking out God, it got thinner. And it got easier and easier for Ignacio to A, talk to me, or B, make me do things that I wasn't going to do. So I tell about it in the book that over the years, he's gotten clearer and clearer. And then I call him Ignacio because during the pandemic, it was just me and him for like months, And so I actually asked him, I said, I'm tired of calling you my angel. Don't you have a name? Can't I call you something? And he responded, I've had so many names in so many lifetimes, and none of them are in alphabets that you know. And so just as shocking as whenever he comes up with a concept that was nowhere on my radar, like so many alphabets and none of them then I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't think of that. So I just kept nagging and begging. And finally, he showed me letters in the air and lined them up. And I first was guessing Iggy Pop, like I didn't know what to guess because he's showing me an IG, but then he puts an E underneath it. Anyway, it turned out to be Ignacio. And I said Ignacio, and he said this. And so then I Googled it, and it means it's Etruscan, which is very ancient, for born of fire. And so he and I can communicate with him a lot, but what he says a lot of the time is be a human. But he's saved my life several times, both driving when he's told me, don't go, just so I avoid getting smashed by a car. And when in the wilderness, he helped me. I have so many stories, and they're all in my book. So yeah. A combination of my experience, and then I've interviewed about 25 NDEers for Seattle Ion's newsletter. So when I get to a point of why can't we communicate with spirits, I will have excerpts from all those interviews. So maybe I'll have 4 or 5 excerpts from other NDEers telling about when they were out of their bodies and yelling, trying to talk to people and no one could hear them, or when they were told you have to go back, or when they saw prayers. I weave in all of those people's NDEs around my NDE.
You painted that yourself in the back there? And that's the same. Oh, wow. That's incredible.
That's the painting, and then here it is on the book. And so these things are like science denier, nut job, all the things that my skeptic would tell me when I would be like, wow, that voice just saved my life, and I'd understand it. And then a week later, I'd be like, you just guessed that. You just thought that. You just decided it wasn't a good idea to go. And skeptic is like a separate personality. More and more, have you ever heard of internal family systems, and that we all are like Sybil? We all have multiple personalities, but they just integrate okay? It's kind of a new theory of psychology. I think it's pretty cool because my skeptic fights with my believer. And even today, my skeptic is saying, why are you doing these interviews, man? You look like an idiot, and
Well, that could just be all of our minds work differently. So maybe you're just hyper analyzing and you're trying to see it from all these different points of view. I have actually heard of something similar where someone tried to say that we have multiple consciousnesses inside of our brain, but I'm I don't know if it's exactly that, but maybe there's just different facets of us that come out at different times,
yeah. I don't think it's multiple consciousnesses. In the internal family system stuff, it's talking about parts theory, and that when you have a trauma, some part of you breaks off to try to protect you from that trauma. And I was raised in an academic home and an atheist home, and my family, my base, my tribe, we don't believe in woo-woo shit. So that is what it's coming. It's saying, wake up, come back to the fold. We don't believe this stuff, and I had to break from that. When I came out as lesbian, it was kind of hard. When I came out to my family and said I'm an alcoholic and I'm not going to drink anymore, that was really hard. But coming out as a woo-woo is harder than anything, because there are some of us who get it, and there are 99% of people out there who say you're just a dummy.
So that actually brings me to my next question quite perfectly. how do you deal with after having not only the near-death experience, but these kind of paranormal events afterwards? I could only presume that, some people probably, might have said you're seeing things that aren't there. I mean, that's got to be kind of tough. How do you deal with that when you try to explain this to people?
You know, one of the NTEers that I interviewed in here, he said it's as if you went somewhere and had dinner with a friend, and then you came back and tried to tell people, oh, I had dinner with so and so. And they're like, are you sure that wasn't a turtle? Maybe you saw one out in the garden and you just thought you were having dinner with someone. Like, that's how it feels. You want to say, I know the difference between a hallucination and uh, being somewhere else. And I know the difference between a thought that is me weighing something back and forth and something that comes in completely different. I can tell just a one little story. How much time do you have? Not much. Just this one time when I had my 18th AA birthday, and I had discovered that I had cancer, but I wasn't gonna have to have a mastectomy. So I changed my 18 AA birthday into a get to keep my boob party, and all my friends came, and in AA I have many friends, so there were about 70 people in here, and they were celebrating and telling me I was going to beat cancer, and they started singing happy birthday. And it was at the same time that this book had just come out, and my family had said, you're a horrible narcissist and you're a liar and you're a terrible human being. And so when they started singing, you get embarrassed when people sing. And I got this self-loathing, like, oh, your siblings are right, you suck, you're a narcissist, that's why you invite all these people here to make a big fuss about you. And I was just hating on myself. And then here came Ignacio, and he says, he's laughing, and he says, don't be silly. This is the whole point of life. Just let them love you. And it kind of broke off into like, it doesn't get any better. So two people took pictures of me at the same time, one with one camera, one with another, maybe a second of difference. There is an orb right next to me. And in the one from my camera, it's very detailed. And the other one I took off Facebook, it's moved up a tiny bit, and you can see the same features, but it's rotated. So he literally zoomed in, told me, let them love you, and left. And I had to be like, turn it around. It was so hard to do. And look in their eyes and realize that these people cared about me. And that's just like one example of how he's taught me what matters in life and made my life, taken what was just something I wanted to throw away and made it such a precious joy filled.
Do you think there's like a playful nature to life, or that it could be just a little bit simpler than we seem? But maybe from our perception, it seems so grandiose, but maybe it's simple and playful.
Well, it's both. God is trying to do something with us. We're individuated. We can't hear the spirit world. We're shut off from it. We evolved not to hear the spirits. We are supposed to choose love. We're supposed to build the momentum of love. That's what matters, and that's what people see in their life reviews, which I didn't have, but people I've interviewed. On the other hand, my angel's always laughing at me. He cracks up so much. And when I get super dramatic, he rolls his eyes. Now, I don't see him, but you can feel the eye rolling energy. And it's because angels, they don't feel drama. They can't feel anguish. And he kind of misses it. Like, what we're doing is we come here and we have all these hurdles of difficulty set up. And when we jump them and we choose love and we be constructive and we don't commit suicide, we get further and further, and the angels are all happy for us. And when you're out, you're done, and you don't have those hurdles, and you kind of miss them. I don't know what angels do, but I know that, one time when my dad was dying, I was like, oh, maybe I'll get to feel the light again. Oh, I'm a horrible person. And then here comes Ignacio, and he's like, ha, 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 ha. And he said, that's just part of the package. You're egocentric. Don't worry about it. Really? But then there's other times when I'm being egocentric, and he's been like, people helped you. You need to help her. And so it just, It's lighter, and yet it does matter.
If you could ask one question to the person watching this video right now, what would it be?
Do you really know what it is to generate love? Because love is so confused in our culture. We think love is about getting, and love is actually something that you generate. And the more you generate it about everybody and everything, the happier you are. So that's what I have learned through AA and through Ignacio's teaching, is that this exchange of love is what it's all about. And when I can make it happen with a spark with a stranger, just in the grocery store, make a joke and people laugh, or see beautiful moments. One time I was at the grocery store and the guy in front of me had only one eye and the cashier was deaf, and it was taking forever. And all of a sudden I saw, wow, they are us. They are stuck each in a defective meat puppet where they have an obstacle, and he is trying to see what the receipt that she is showing him, and when he moves like that, she can't read his lips. And I loved them so much. So when it got to be my turn, the biggest thing I wanted them to know was that I wasn't mad about the long wait, and I cracked a joke and they laughed and everybody down the line laughed, and we were all happy together. And I could just feel Ignacio going, cha-ching, like, good one. So it's to see yourself in others and to understand that we're all doing the same thing, and to love each other,
I actually completely agree with that. And one thing I've had to work on this show, because I crack jokes. I'll crack jokes with my guests. I haven't done it too much tonight because I'm like, the topic of conversation is, it's quite serious. So I'm like, how much can I really joke around? But I do the same thing, when you go in a grocery store, there's nothing like making someone smile. Honestly, it's a beautiful thing. If you could give one piece of advice to someone who, let's say, maybe has a fear of death, or, God forbid, has lost a loved one, me personally having kind of like existential questions, it might sometimes get stressful. Is there anything you could say to them that might kind of alleviate this inevitable passing of our bodies?
My own experience and that of NDEers who had out of body experiences. One guy I interviewed said, it's just seamless. You're in your body and then you're out of it. And he said, I always thought there'd be some bells and whistles, something to tell me, but I saw my body and I was like, shit, I'm dead. And that was the only thing he had felt, was a little bit of that Zoom thing I talked about moving forward. And then he was trying to talk to the people around his body and say, actually, I'm fine, it's all good. And they couldn't hear him. So even though you can't hear your loved ones, they are there and they are trying to reach you. My father has reached me. My mother has reached me. My alcoholic boyfriend who drank himself to death after cheating and ruining everything has reached me. And I can hear them because having had my near-death experience has thinned my sheath. But your sheath is supposed to be there. You are supposed to navigate this life as an individual with free will. But you can, if you can raise your vibration with lots and lots of love and calling up the energy of that person. Because when I knew my sister, her energy was in the room after she died. There's a way that their love feels. Think of the person and the way that it felt to be with them in the energy of their love. Focus on that and then ask a question. Like when I asked my father, is there something you need to tell me? And that's when he came back and showed me how much he regretted making me jump through hoops for love instead of just loving me. Or he wanted me to know he did love me regardless of things. But when you are feeling loving, you are more likely to raise your vibration and thin your shell and be able to perceive it and then trust it. Trusting it is half of it. Ned Mantina, who does the NDE thing on Facebook, he's become a medium, and he said half of it is learning to trust these little inklings that you get. And So don't let your cynical side call the shots.
Louisa, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on, and you are genuinely just an absolute treat to talk to. So this has been incredible, and I could not be more thankful. Um, maybe we'll have to have you on again sometime, but for now, thank you so much. And where can people find you if they want to look at more of your stuff?
Well, there will be stuff down there that we will post links to the books. And then I also have written a blog for 13 years on sobriety. And so that's also a thing. And then I climb mountains. I'm turning 64 next month, but I'm climbing a 10,000-foot mountain, leading it, glacier climb. So I post videos of that stuff. So that's on my YouTube channel. More, I mean, there's some spiritual stuff, but mainly it's climbing the mountains. And that's about it.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, everyone should go check out her books and her channels, and I'm sure you're gonna have a great time. Um, with that, thank you again for coming on, and to everyone watching, thank you so much for your sliver of time. This has been ours. Louisa, thank you again, and peace out, everyone.
Peace out, everyone.